And perhaps the existential question for this episode could be, what did you do to deserve your eyes today?
Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corrine from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Hello and welcome to Keep It Fictional, the book lovers podcast from the Port Moody Public Library. This is Sadie, and I will be hosting today's episode. And today I am joined by my book friends Virginia and Corrine. And today we will, of course, be talking about books, but with a specific focus on a very specific part of the book. Now, some books have great first lines. Others have great final words, while other books focus on amazing chapter titles or even informative and sometimes humorous footnotes. But the books that we will be talking about today all have one other thing in common. They, at least subjectively, all have great titles. Now, I believe that we have actually done this topic before. I think I was not here during that time, but there are so many wonderful titles out there that we wanted to bring it back and introduce our listeners to even more wonderfully titled books, or at least ones that we think are wonderfully titled books. This is actually a question that I didn't prepare my book friends for, but do you think that the quality of a book title is subjective, or is there something that makes a book title really, really good?
No, I think you can objectively say that there's like some really good book titles, because I think one that's really successful kind of gives you a sense of the atmosphere in the book, or like a sense of mystery that you want to know, why did you call that book that book? Thinking of like the secret history, like, okay, like you get a sense like there's going to be a little bit talking about the past. There's something hidden that needs to be uncovered. Like you really get a sense of the book from only like 3 words together, or like The Catcher in the Rye. Why is that catcher in that rye? Why a catcher? Why rye? So I think that you can actually really do a powerful title that can intrigue a great number of readers.
I don't know. I feel like it might be a bit more subjective in my mind, because I feel like a lot of things are kind of like they're special to you, like for whatever reason, just something intrigues you about it. So I think just like covers, just like a lot of things, like I think about a book that I feel like, it really is up to, I think, the reader who just like something about that.
Yeah, see, I'm a bit more on your side, Virginia. I looked up good book titles just kind of to see what the world considered a good book title. And yeah, Catcher in the Rye came up. I feel like even Great Expectations came up. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And I just kind of thought about it. I'm like, okay, The Curious Incident of the Dog, that one maybe. But Catcher in the Rye, I don't see that as a good book title.
Why is the catcher in the rye?
I totally agree. I don't care. Like, I'm just like, whatever. That doesn't mean anything to me. But yeah, you're right. Like, there's certain weird ones, like, especially I think sometimes if they're very long, like, I feel like the longer ones are intriguing, because it's almost like a sentence in some ways. Maybe they're cheating that way. Like, so it's like there's something about them that makes it like what? Like, just like, guess maybe a little bit more information. I don't know.
Because what is it? The history of tractors in the Ukraine, like that, also one of those kind of like very long descriptive titles that, it kind of makes you smile a little bit when you read it. It's a little bit cheeky. It's a little bit intriguing. And, is it cheating because it's technically an entire sentence? Perhaps. But the title is just a part of the marketing, right? Like it is there to entice you into the book. So something like that is definitely a ploy. Like, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. Again, great title. Objectively, I would say a great title.
The eyes are the best part.
Also a great title.
To me, that's a great title. Because you just be like, what is happening, right? And I mean, as your point, Corrine, like it also gives you probably a good sense of what the book may be about, or at least it gets your imagination going about what do you mean The best part about what? Anyway.
Yeah, I think it draws you in and makes you want to learn a little bit more about why every person in that person's family has killed someone. It just, yeah. So I think, yeah. Okay. Thank you for weighing in on that. Now, I have one more question before we get into our books. And I'm curious to know, how much does the title of the book actually affect whether you are going to read the book or not? Now, we said that it could potentially draw you in. Would it ever turn you off from a book? Or how much how much weight do you put on the title of a book?
We kind of talked about this a little before we started the podcast, just to give you a hint of behind the scenes. And I think our answer was none. But having said that, there are certain genres of books that the titles are usually, I'm thinking of like cozy mysteries, where the titles are horrible puns. And like the worse the pun, the kind of less it makes me want to read it because I'm so angry at it. It's so cheesy. There's like stop in the name of pause, and it's like a cat mystery. And I'm just like, ugh. And it makes me just angry enough that sometimes I don't pick up the book because it's really bad. It's really bad. But like some genres that I read, like mysteries, like often the titles are pretty generic. Like there's not a lot of interest going on in them. So while I said no, I guess the answer is actually yes. And like different fantasy books and stuff like that, if I'm just browsing by title, like if it is a really good title, that might actually draw me in enough that I'm interested. If it's an allusion to something that I really like or is kind of resonant of something that I've read before, then I will probably pick it up. So I guess Karina 5 minutes ago is an absolute liar.
I guess for me, like it will get me curious about what the book is, but I think ultimately especially if it's not an author that I know, ultimately I do have to read the description to see whether it is something that I would read or not. One of the books that I'll consider for this episode is a short story collection by an Irish author that came out this year called Quickly While They Still Have Horses. And there's something about that title, like I don't like horses, do not care about it, but just something about that. I want to know, like, well, where are the horses going to go? Like, is it like the end of, like, what is going on, right? And then I read it, and I read the description. It's like a kind of they say it's all the short stories, like kind of like surreal, talking about like, Ireland and all that. And I'm just like, okay, well, like once I get to the description, I'm like, hey, I will read it. But at least that will get my attention out of all the books that are out there with like other boring titles, right? Like, like I would just probably skip it. But, knowing that the title is interesting, but at least get me to read the description a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's for me as well. I don't know if I would necessarily avoid a book because of its title, although I do definitely groan at some of those bad mystery pun titles. But yeah, I think if it was a particularly interesting or intriguing or good title, then it could draw me in and it would make me want to at least learn a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny. Like listening to this conversation, I was thinking about the long list for the National Book Awards. Because like there's some very good books in there that honestly, when I read the title, I was like, James? James. It's a really boring title. It's a boring title and tells you nothing. Whereas opposed to martyr, ! Like there is something about that just works. So yeah, I'm just really proving myself a total liar today. Yeah, because I wouldn't have picked up James unless it was on that book award, because that is such a boring title. But martyr! I
pick up James because his personal effort. Like, who cares about the title?
Yeah,
It
but
doesn't matter.
James.
Doesn't matter. Even if it's an untitled book, I'll read it.
Excellent. Well, apparently there was more debate to this question than I had anticipated, which I find is always the way on Keep It Fictional. So that's a good to stay true to the course. I appreciate that. All right. Well, why don't we get into our books today? So we're going to start with Virginia. Virginia, what book title do you think is objectively or subjectively a very good title?
Probably subjectively, but I guess we'll find out. As I mentioned, and we talked about earlier, it has to be a title that I think no matter, you draw you in, you want to read it. And I think for me, for this specific episode, there's one author that I feel like consistently came up with great titles for his book, and I think he deserves to be mentioned on this topic. The author is Eric LaRocca. And I feel like I need to give a little bit of information, I guess, or maybe content warning about his story first before I start. Eric LaRocca is a newish horror writer of short stories and novella, and he leans heavily towards body horror. So I think it's really important, like I said, to be very clear that his books are for horror readers that have a strong stomach. He's not shy in his descriptions of anything that is being done, can be done to various body parts, things that you may never even have considered that can be done. And the descriptions are very detailed. They are hard to read. And he is, in fact, an author, which is a weird thing to say on a podcast about book recommendation that I would not really recommend to most people unless I know you very well and unless I know your tolerance level. And this is actually the author that I feel like helped me and our coworker Sydney understand where we are both at. Because we are like, okay, you like this also. Now I know what kind of level of intensity that you are willing to accept in your book. So that's maybe give at least my book friends here a bit of a sense of like where this is going. However, I think what makes Eric LaRocca's stories different from other body horror stories and that gain him that respect from his fellow writers is that he is not just doing the shocking icky thing just for the sake of that. I think he really do explore sort of that darker side of the human psyche, but also maybe more so the darker side of like relationships, the really, really dark side of things. And he is going to go into those really uncomfortable places to reveal that need that we all have for connections with others. And he does it really, really well in so many of his stories. So I just want to start with this long preamble because I think as the author said in the introduction in many of his books, his stories does deal with not just the body horror part, but it deals with a lot of subject matters that can be quite distressing to many. And he really wants his readers to take care of themselves and be prepared. So I just want to make sure that you got warning for that. And if body horror is not your thing, please feel free to skip to the next book title. So on to his books. As I said, so many great titles. His most recent book is called This Skin Was Once Mine. And then the one before that was called The Trees Grew Because I Bled There. And another one called You've Lost a Lot of Blood. And the book that I think put him on the map for horror writers, and I'm going to be honest, I think there are many people who love him and there are also many people who don't like him and doesn't get the hype. But the book that I think put him on the map is called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, which I think is a great title. And also, I think he also will be a good candidate for any books with great covers. So this is the one that has the novella and also 2 other stories in it. But I'm going to mainly talk about Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. There's a novella that is sort of framed as a bunch of documentations that are found and presented to us while there is a trial going on. And they contain correspondences between Agnes and Zoe, the victim and the accused respectively. And through copies of their email exchanges and transcripts of their online chat sessions, we learn how they got to know one another, all because of an apple peeler. Agnes got into an online marketplace to try to sell her family heirloom, her family antique apple peeler. And it's got a great story from her grandmother about how she forced her husband basically to get her a peeler, something that involves like apples and sewing needles. I'll let you discover that yourself. It also allegedly, though Agnes admits that she can verify the story, that this apple peeler is one that has been used by a very, very famous composer at a picnic. So of all the replies that she got from people who want to buy this apple peeler, there was one that stood out from someone named Zoe. Zoe wrote a very, very thoughtful reply outline why Agnes should sell her the apple peeler, even though she doesn't quite fit the profile of who Agnes is looking for as a buyer. She said that her father loves that composer. And even though the story may not be true, it would make a great gift and he would really, really appreciate it. So Agnes decides to pick Zoe, thinking that, she cares enough to write me and responds, I think I'm going to sell her the apple peeler. And through the next few correspondences, Agnes admit that, oh, well, the reason why I'm selling this, even though it belongs to my family and it's really, really dear to me, is that I do need rent money. That's really why I need money to pay rent. Also, that I came out to my family a while back and they have stopped talking to me. They refuse to talk to me. So, I feel like it's time. It's time to kind of maybe move on in some ways. And then Zoe decides to make Agnes an offer. So he said, money has never been a worry for me. I never have to think about it. And I would love to help someone in the community. So if you give me your bank information, I'm going to set up a deposit and I'm going to pay your rent every single month. I'm sorry, that is like super suspicious, but maybe that is just me because Agnes is like, wow, really? You're willing to do that for me? That's amazing. And she accepted the offer and she is so, so, so grateful that someone is willing to reach out to her like that. And that's kind of how their, friendship begins. They email one another all the time. They get on instant messaging late at night. They never meet. They just talk online. And one day Zoe said to Agnes, if I may, my father used to ask me a question every night. He would say to me, what did you do to deserve your eyes today? And I guess that's his way to remind me to make every day count. So, Agnes, I'd like to ask you that question. What did you do to deserve your eyes today? And Agnes is like, well, I don't really have a good answer today. So I don't really know. It's okay, says Zoe. Let me help you. I want you to try something. Tomorrow, I would like you to buy the reddest dress that you can find and pair that up with the reddest lipstick that you can find. And you work as a receptionist in the office, a pretty normal, regular office. I'd like you to wear that to your office one day. And Agnes thought that was kind of a weird request, but it's not doing any harm to anybody. And yeah, it might be kind of fun to see how shocked her coworkers are. So she was like, okay, maybe I'll do this. And then a couple of days later, she emailed Zoe back and said, I did it. I did what you said. I found the reddest, most garish looking dress that I could find, and I wore that to the office. And people were super shocked. They just stared at me. They didn't know what to say to me. And then in the afternoon, I was called into the supervisor office and they told me to take the rest of the day off and then come back tomorrow in something a little bit more appropriate. But, I felt alive, like just doing this. I feel like I have shed some skin that wasn't me. Like I feel like I found myself. This is strange, but very exciting. I really love that feeling that I got today. And I think I deserve my eyes today. I think that, that's something that I can proudly say. And so he said, you certainly do. You certainly do. And, if you like, I'd like to help you maybe find a good answer every day. And Zoe gives Agnes her second task as things, as you can predict, get more and more messed up. And they end up signing a contract where Agnes agreed to do everything that Zoe said and never questions her. And Zoe agrees to provide for Agnes and gives her everything that she needs and she wants. And if you're squirming in your chair right now, you are right in doing so. Because did I mention that things get really, really mess up in a way that at some point I'm just like, wow, I did not see this coming. And I feel like having read the story the second time over the past week, I feel like maybe I'm a little out of practice with my horror novels because I haven't been reading as much because I was just like, wait, like this is kind of very upsetting. And I keep thinking the title could also be Things Have Gotten Worse Since You Last Turned the Page, because every single page gets worse. It's a super toxic online relationship that Eric LaRocca is describing. As I mentioned, Agnes and Zoe have never met in person, but most of his stories deals with like sort of that. What were we willing to do to connect with someone? How far are we willing to go? And you can just hear that cry for help. And that fills up many of his stories. And it's always about somebody really trying to reach out and that they're doing a lot of things that are not good for them. Again, it's extremely distressing. And there's some very, very, very upsetting things in there that so I again on an episode like this, like very often we don't say like, don't pick up this book, but like I want to say make sure that like definitely not a book for every reader. But I think if you are a horror fan and if you're okay with body horror, if you are prepared to be upset, I think then Eric LaRocca is an author that you really should check out, because he does take horror into a different direction, and it would be really nice to see and refreshing, I think, for me to see kind of where horror can go in this. So yeah. So with a cautious recommendation. I know. I mean, like, it's got a great title. I'm like, I want to talk about this book, but I also hesitant so much about talking about this. But anyway, maybe this is just a book for me and Cindy. I don't know. But it's called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. And perhaps the existential question for this episode could be, what did you do to deserve your eyes today?
Nope. I appreciate the honest review, and I will very confidently say that is not the book for me. But I am sure that it is the book for someone out there. I'm sure that there are other readers who would enjoy that. So thank you, Virginia, for bringing that one and for bringing the author to our attention. All right, Corrine, what have you done to deserve your eyes today? And does it include your book title?
No, I don't feel like I have deserved my eyes. That's why I have to wear glasses. Virginia, I fully checked out of what you were saying after that question. Reluctantly, I had to listen to it, but no. So for a very radical change of pace, we're going to go over to my book, which I feel like is like a beautiful tribute to a very particular time on the internet. So I think Sadie was introducing one of our colleagues to Cake Rex, the beautiful, inspirational blog of user-submitted bad cakes. And I feel like that kind of belonged to a very special genre of blog on the internet of a very particular time when the internet was sweet and young. Cake Rex, my personal favorite of awkward family photos, some of which still bring me joy. Or was kind of like user-submitted, lighthearted fun at others' minor misfortunes. It's a chance where you could just kind of laugh at someone whose cake definitely looks like poo. Or awkward family photos where you're not sure if it's a sister or a wife or an aunt. You just can't tell by the way everyone is posing awkwardly with their hands around each other. And this one has a very bookish flavor to it. Now, we don't work in a bookstore. However, we do work in a public library. And I'm sure all of us have many, many, many stories to tell about sometimes the little odd questions that you get. Now, bookshops, I think, also attract a different kind of clientele who are looking for something particular or something peculiar. And they have all been collected into this wonderful book with the strange title, I hope, Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops by Jen Campbell. Now, this is an adorable little collection of weird things that customers say in bookshops. So I feel like in a way I'm cheating a little because the title really just is what it is in the tin, but still counts. And I deserve my eyeballs. Thank you very much, because I did read this book and it does have a strange title. Now, Jen Campbell is no stranger to weird titles. She had this blog. She did YouTube videos for a while, but she's also an author herself. Some of her books include The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. Great title. The Girl Aquarium, and possibly more in Virginia's lane than mine, but the middle grade book, The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers. So she is very fond of an interesting title, and I feel like this one definitely kind of fits the bill. She worked in bookstores for a long time and now works as a freelance editor as well as an author. And in this book, she has two sections from perhaps kind of largest and established bookstores in the UK, one from the Edinburgh Bookshop and one from Ripping Yarns. And then the last section of the book is just weird things customers say in other bookshops. So users submitted questions that they have been asked as they work, ranging from, "Excuse me, is this book edible?" to "Can books conduct electricity?" to wonderful queries such as, "Do you have any Robin Hood stories where he doesn't steal from the rich? Because my husband's name is Robin and I'd like to buy him a copy, but he's a banker." So some of my personal favorites, like a customer asks, "Oh, do you have the time?" And the bookseller responds, "Yes, it's 4:00. And the customer responds, "No, it isn't." The charming interactions where you have with the public. You can essentially flip through any page here and get some gold. It will make you laugh. It will make you cry. It will make you worry sometimes about the state of the world, but in a charming, wonderful way. What I like about this is that it's just really a selection of quotes between customer and bookseller. They're also in very good fun. They're not there to kind of put down, because we've all had a moment where we've asked a silly question. Our brains just kind of leave us, and they're just here for the amusement of everyone. Who wouldn't laugh when you read, the customer asks, "Do you have a children's book I've heard about? It's supposed to be very good. It's called Lionel Richie in the Wardrobe." Or again, just opening up to a round of play, customer, "Oh, look, these books are all signed. I wonder who signed them." Customer, pointing back and forth from the bookseller to a full-size cutout of Legolas. "Is that you?" "No, that's Orlando Bloom." Come on. From people trying to drop off their children to just live there, to these strange requests that they get, to just sometimes a beautiful misunderstanding. Customer, "What kind of bookshop is this?" Bookseller, "Ah, we're an antiquarian bookshop." Customer, "Ah, so you sell book about fish." To questions like, "Hey, do you sell bath plugs?" Come on. There's something here for everyone. Customer, "Excuse me, do you have any signed copies of Shakespeare plays?" Do you mean signed by people who performed the play?" "No, I mean signed by William Shakespeare." "Hello, I'm looking for a Mr. Patrick." "Oh, I'm sorry. No one of that name works here. Sorry." "But does he live here?" "No one lives here. We're a bookshop." "Are you sure?" Whenever I'm sad, I pick up this book to a random page and make myself happy. Customer, "Do you have a copy of Bridget Jones' The Edge of Reason? I can't see it on the shelf." "Oh, I'm afraid we don't, but I can order it for you, and it will be here in the next 48 hours. We could even post it to you if you'd like." Customer, "I don't trust the Royal Mail. Could you fax it instead?" If you're feeling glum, I really recommend, if you're a book person, if you're a book lover, if you've ever worked in customer service, to pick up this lovely, lighthearted book and get such gems as, customer, "Do you have any crime books involving speeding fines?" Or, "What's this literary criticism book? Is it for books that complain about other books?" "Do you have any books in this shade of green to match the wrapping paper I've bought?" Come on. I might actually just buy this for everyone on staff to kind of flip through. But for all of my fellow book friends out there, if you are needing a little lift, if you're needing something just kind of wonderful and warm-hearted and bookish, but buffoonish, I would definitely recommend that you pick up Jen Campbell's compilation of weird things customers say in bookshops.
Oh, that's very good. That's very, very good. I don't know how I've never actually heard of that book before. I feel like as somebody who has worked in a bookstore, yeah, and now a library. Well, I will definitely be looking into that one because that is very good. Very good. All right. For my book, I really was not sure what to read for this week. As we kind of discussed at the beginning, I don't really put a ton of stock in the titles of books, I would say, at least not kind of average to good titles. If a book is bad, or as we kind of discussed a little bit, I might not, or I might at least groan while I read the title of it. And so looking through like my back catalog of read books, I didn't really notice anything right off the bat that I could use for this episode. So I went to Google and I searched. And one title did catch my eye, even though the kind of book is not actually generally the type of book that I gravitate towards. I decided to give it a try based solely on the title. The only reason why I read it. So this is I Was Told There'd Be Cake, Essays by Sloane Crosley. Sloane Crosley is an American writer. She's written a few books of essays. I Was Told There'd Be Cake being the first, as well as a couple of novels. Her writing is humorous, it's bold, it's sardonic. She's very open about most of the things she writes about, sometimes more than you would like her to be. But you can't fault her honesty. Most of her stories are a little bit strange, but in the kind of way that you can kind of find yourself relating to and nodding along as if you've had maybe not the exact same experience, then probably something a little bit similar in your life. You're like, yeah, no, I've been there. I get that. She opens the book with an essay titled The Pony Problem, in which she outlines how, as most New Yorkers, she often thinks about what would happen if she got pushed into the subway track, or a lead pipe falls on her head, or some other random way she is killed in the Big Apple. And what exactly people would think about the state of her apartment. And what people would think if they had to clean out her house, and how they would judge her, most specifically for the drawer of toy ponies. Now, these toy ponies have been given to her over a series of relationships, when inevitably at some point every man would ask her what she wanted. And she would always reply, a pony. Now, in her mind, she wanted a real life pony, the stereotypical wish of every child, but the toy ponies were a nice touch that showed that these people maybe even a little bit cared about her and what she wanted. However, she did realize that if her parents ever had to clean out her apartment after she died, they would be very shocked and surprised and a little curious about what this drawer of toy ponies meant. So Sloane decides that she needs to get rid of them. But it's New York, so she can't just throw them in the garbage. Everyone knows that people go through your garbage. And so she concocts a plan where she brings a bag onto the subway filled with her toy ponies. And quietly, subtly, over the course of her ride, she lowers the bag to the ground and she inadvertently pushes the bag under the seat. She leaves the bag on the train. She gets off the train and she walks away. It's only later that she realizes leaving a random, strange, unattended bag on a subway is maybe not the smartest thing to do. And she hopes that she did not ruin some other young woman's day who had to sit above that bag, slowly thinking that she was going to be killed by a bomb. I think that one of the stories I enjoyed most was titled The Ursula Cookie, in which Sloane finally gets a job in publishing, which she has wanted for many years. And she first meets her boss, Ursula. She loves her. The woman moves at 1,000,000 miles a minute. They talk for over 2 hours about publishing, short stories, the state of Iowa, and bad Mexican food. Sloane is given the job and can't wait to get started. But soon after, she starts to realize that Ursula isn't exactly the same as she was in her interview. Or maybe she is exactly how she was in the interview, but Sloane just didn't realize that working for someone like that may not have been as simple as she thought. Ursula's expectations start getting bigger, and Sloane starts disappointing these expectations on a daily basis. It gets to the point where Sloane hates going to work, and her and Ursula are in an out-and-out battle. So one night, during a late-night holiday baking stint, Sloane decides to make a cookie in the shape of Ursula's head. She has just mastered the art of icing sugar cookies with that beautiful, perfect, hard icing that makes them look all nice and fancy. And so she crafts an Ursula cookie, hoping that when she presents it to her boss, every slight and missed deadline will be forgiven. It does not go well. I think that Ursula's daughter eats the entire thing and then throws up. In the end, Sloane calls in sick to work, saying that an elderly aunt has passed away and she needs to take some time off. She finally feels the weight lifting from her shoulders, but is surprised when later that day she gets a panicked phone call from her father, asking why Sloane's job called her parents to give their condolences to her mother at the loss of her father. It seems that Sloane's fake crying phone call slurred her words a bit too much, and aunt sounded very much like dad. Now, the other story I found interesting is one where Sloane recounts when she was asked to be a bridesmaid in a high school friend's wedding. Now, this friend, who it's now 10 years after high school, she has not talked to once in the intervening years. And Sloane is a little surprised when she gets the call asking to be in the wedding, but she ends up agreeing, and thus begins one of the weirdest and stressful years in her life, in which she learns that being a bridesmaid to someone you haven't spoken to in a decade is just as awkward as you might expect it to be. Whether it's the hour-long phone calls where the bride tries to bring Sloane up to date on her life and her fiancé, so it's not weird when this person is standing up next to you when you get married, or the very specific fabric that Sloane has to drive to Poughkeepsie to buy for her dress, or the extremely awkward conversation when Sloane needs to bow out of the last-minute bachelorette party, and the bride calls in tears, saying how is she supposed to celebrate when her maid of honor, Sloane, isn't there. Now, Sloane has no idea how or when she became the maid of honor to this woman she hasn't seen in 10 years. It may have stemmed from a simple question of, oh, who is your maid of honor? But Sloane isn't really sure. These are 3 of the essays in the book. There are many more, and they all recount another strange, terrible, or hilarious point in Sloane's life, like when she locks herself out of both her old apartment and her new apartment in the same 3-hour period and has to call the same locksmith to get her back in. The book was enjoyable to read. I would say that it's not a super memorable book, if that makes sense. I enjoyed it. I listened to it, actually, and I laughed at some of the stories. I kind of followed along. And as I said, I could relate to some of the things she was talking about. But once I was done, nothing really stuck with me. Nothing really stayed with me for too long. But I would say that it is an enjoyable story. It did bring up a reminder of some of my childhood, like Fimo clay, which I don't think I've thought about Fimo clay since I was a child. And then also the classic 80s and 90s video game, The Oregon Trail, which I spent many hours playing when I was a kid, and so did Sloane. I would say that this book is akin to Mindy Kaling's Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me? Or Rachel Bloom's I Want to Be Where the Normal People Are. So if you enjoy those kinds of stories, kind of some humorous real-life events with a huge amount of honesty, then I would say that this would be a good book for you. So this is I Was Told There'd Be Cake, Essays by Sloane Crosley.
I love that you chose that one. So memorably, it's one of the only audiobooks that I have ever listened to because I was driving, I think, from Vancouver to Lethbridge, which is like a 14-hour drive in the middle of the summer. And there was like wildfires, and my car didn't have air conditioning, and it was like 45 degrees. And so I had to have the windows pulled down as I was driving, or else I would die. And so I was listening to this audiobook on a very, very, very high volume because otherwise I couldn't hear it. And so I'm driving through the interior, and it's getting late, and I'm like, okay, I need to find like somewhere to sleep for the night. And so I kind of pull into this very small town, kind of see a sign for a motel, and I'm like, okay, I'll see if they have a room. I pull in, and there's like some pretty rough looking individuals there, like standing outside having a smoke with like their motorbikes parked to the side with like their vests and their boots, and they're looking pretty rough, beards for days. And I cut the ignition of my car, and out comes Sloane Crosley's voice. I've never had a one night stand before. And I was like, and we're going. Their heads whip towards me. I turn back on my car, pull out, and head back to the road. Yeah. So that is that, as you say, like the stories aren't necessarily all memorable. So for me, that's the most memorable moment of that book.
It's very good. It's very good. I feel like Sloane would appreciate that. Just from like the little introduction to her in her writing, I feel like she would appreciate that story. And yeah, I think she would like to be happy to be a part of that time in your life. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening today. You'll have to let us know if you think the titles that we have picked are also good titles, or if this is just entirely subjective and we all don't know what we're talking about. Thank you so much to my book friends for joining me today. And thank you to our listeners. And we will be back again next week for a new episode. And we will see you then. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.